Hi, I'm Wendy Turner, Executive Director of Michigan Public. You might have heard that public media is under threat. You're not wrong. But I come to tell you that your voice has power. Visit protectmypublicmedia.org, contact your lawmakers, and take a stand today.
From Michigan Public, this is It's Just Politics. I'm Zoe Clark.
And I'm Rick Pluta.
If I've heard one thing across the campaign trail, people are exhausted, myself included, with the division.
Today, we continue our conversations with the candidates who've announced they are running for governor.
I'm running on merit, and I think Democrats have to run on merit.
Genesee County Sheriff Chris Swanson is here to explain why he thinks he can win in the Democratic primary.
But first, aside from those candidates for statewide office, it's also that time when groups are gearing up ballot question campaigns.
Recent elections in Michigan have seen the approval of early in-person voting and no reason absentee voting, basically making access to voting easier in the state.
But now a petition for a constitutional amendment to tighten the state's voter ID laws is one step closer to gathering signatures.
That's after the Board of State Canvassers approved the petition summary language at their last meeting. Colin Jackson, Capitol reporter at the Michigan Public Radio Network, is here to fill us in. Hey, Colin.
Hey, Zoe. Hey, Rick.
Hello.
So first, if approved, what would this ballot question do?
So a few things that this ballot initiative would do would be, one, it would require people to show proof of citizenship when it comes down to registering to vote. Currently in Michigan, when you're registering, you just need to check a box saying that you're a citizen under penalty of perjury. This would change that. So now you need to actually show some sort of document, whether that's a passport or a birth certificate or something of the like. Beside that, it would get rid of an exception currently in state law in the state constitution that allows people who don't have physical IDs present at the polls to still vote. Under this amendment, you could still vote at the polls, but then you would still need to later, within a few days of voting, still show that proof of photo ID. Otherwise, your vote wouldn't count. Beyond that, it would require the Secretary of State to go through the voter rolls and clean up anyone that she wouldn't be able to identify as a citizen using either federal data or something else. The sponsors of this petition say that would be basically up to the legislature to decide how that will work out. So those are the main things. It's an aim to ensure that only citizens are registered to vote in Michigan.
So the group pushing for this ballot question, it's called the Committee to Protect Voters' Rights. Why do they say this measure is needed?
Well, this is part of a long-standing voter integrity debate or election integrity debate that we've been hearing over the past many years now. A few weeks ago, the Secretary of State's office came out with its own review and basically found that 15 non-citizens may have voted in the last election. And that's in addition to a well-publicized case of an international student from China who had also voted in the election. And so the sponsor of this petition say anytime you have one non-citizen voting, that threatens election integrity for everyone else. The Secretary of State's office is pointing out that this is a fraction of a fraction of a fraction of a percent when it comes down to who actually voted, especially in the last presidential election, and that none of these votes changed any outcomes. The sponsors of this petition are still saying, one non-citizen voting is one too many.
What did you hear at the Board of State Canvassers from those who are opposed to this measure?
Well, for the people who are opposed to this measure, they're saying that this would make it harder to vote in Michigan, that this could potentially disenfranchise people, especially people who may have changed their name from the birth certificate. Think married women who have changed their maiden name. Mm-hmm. They talk about people who grew up in rural areas or even just older folks who don't have the same types of records or record keeping wasn't as important, especially when it comes down to, maybe older Black Americans. They've had these issues. Beside that, you also just heard in general that the trend in Michigan over the past few ballot initiatives, whether it's in 2018 or 2022, those ballot initiatives have gone a long way to try to make it easier to vote and expand access to the ballot through things like a permanent absentee voter list or same-day voter registration. Some of the opponents to this ballot initiative say this could threaten that especially when it comes down to, that guaranteed right to vote at the polls, maybe if you forgot your wallet at home or something that day, or even registering to vote online. There was a lot of concern and a lot of discussion over whether or not it would still be possible to register to vote online if you have to verify your documents, your citizenship documents, whether that's uploading a birth certificate or a passport or something else.
This language that was approved by the Board of State Canvassers, it's not the amendment itself, right?
No, so this language is a 100-word summary. So this is what will go at the top of a petition when you see the throngs of people go out with clipboards trying to get you to sign, probably this summer when I talk to the amendment sponsors. So along with that, there is the full language. This is a pretty complex amendment, but this would be the 100-word summary that people read when they decide whether or not to sign this petition.
So what happens next?
So the next steps is really for the sponsors of the petition to get together their campaign and start sending people out to gather signatures. There's a pretty high signature threshold. This is similar to an effort that people had tried to go embark on in 2022. At that point, 3 years ago, they were caught up in a signature gathering scandal where they were not able to collect enough valid signatures to get that on the ballot. This time, the threshold is going to be a little bit over 445,000. So the sponsors say they're going to use a mix of paid signature gatherers and volunteers, but really they're saying as soon as the weather gets consistently warm, they're going to try to hit the ground running.
Colin, finally, we should also note there are Republicans in the state house who are trying to go about putting this question on the ballot through legislative means. So for folks who are also hearing about votes in the legislature, can you explain what this other option is?
So House Republicans, led by Majority Floor Leader Brian Postumus, they're also trying to put this constitutional amendment on the ballot that way. So that would require supermajority votes in both chambers of the legislature to get this on the ballot. Just given that Democrats are widely opposed to this, or Democratic lawmakers at least have largely criticized this. Some may support it in practice, but it's unlikely you're going to see enough votes out of either chamber, especially since Democrats control the Senate, to actually put this on the ballot. So if this does make it to the ballot, signature gathering is probably going to be the most likely way.
That is Colin Jackson, Capitol reporter at the Michigan Public Radio Network. Colin, thanks so much.
Thanks for having me.
The next statewide election is still a year and a half away, but that has not stopped a flood of candidate announcements for those statewide offices.
We are talking with the candidates running for governor here on It's Just Politics.
This past week, Rick, I caught up with Democrat Chris Swanson.
He is the sheriff of Genesee County and gained notoriety during the 2020 social justice protests. That's when he took off his riot gear and joined protesters.
He also got a spot to speak last summer at the Democratic National Convention. And like with the other candidates we have spoken to, I started just by asking him, why is he running for governor?
You know, anybody at this level runs because they want to do something great. But what makes me a little different, Zoe, is I have my whole life answered people's call when there's brokenness and there's trauma. When I do that, it fills me, it thrills me, it just drives me. And being a governor, you get to do that for 10 million people. It is a rite of passage, so to speak, from sheriff to run as governor, to do more and help more people. That's the bottom line.
What's the biggest issue right now facing Michiganders?
I think it's a three-part answer: economy, education, and public safety. Clearly, the economy affects all of us. We see it. And it's not just about making sure people have jobs, but it's how do we grow Michigan economy? How do we have a bigger GDP? How do we create bigger opportunities for returning citizens, people that are, coming up from the school system, whether it's elementary, middle school, high school? Economy is a deep answer, but also the education system itself. The great teachers and administrators that are already there, how do we fill the gaps? It's not a broken system. We're just going to make it a better system. And then, of course, public safety. I have known that world for 32 years. And if you don't keep people safe, if they don't feel safe, then it ripples effects in all of their areas. I'm going to protect people's families, their children from predators, people from fentanyl through Operation Vigilant. All those are touch points, top priority.
So the economy, let's drill in. Governor Whitmer will often say a governor cannot simply wave a magic wand and end inflation. But certainly as governor, you do have tools in your toolbox. What is one policy proposal of yours to help the state's economy?
Great question. And I agree with the governor in part that you can't just wave a magic wand and make sure prices, whether it's domestic goods or edibles or things that we go to the store for or gasoline, but there are things that you can do. Gas tax holidays for Memorial Day, for 4th of July, for Labor Day to increase people's travel so they can spend more money at hotels and restaurants and entertain. You can do My Michigan Tuesdays, which Tuesdays, if you look at any small business, and 33 million businesses in America, the majority of them are small businesses. If you can inspire people to go shop and visit on the first Tuesday of the month, driving people to small businesses. And when it comes to prices, I use this example, we have never talked about the price of eggs more than we have these last 6 months. So my quick response is, how do we encourage farmers to raise more chickens in Michigan? A simple fix like that. It's taking it step by step, building out an economy that involves our incumbent industries. How do you make them more successful? Because that in turn creates jobs. It creates the ripple effect. As I said, those folks spend money in our communities. They go to restaurants, they entertain. The governor has the ability to build relationships and has the ability to solve issues that are of all of our concerns. That's how you attack the economy. You look at places where you do have influence, and the other ones you build those relationships and attract new information.
Let's continue to talk about policy. You mentioned a gas tax holiday. Let's talk about the roads. The last Democrat who won Michigan as governor, Gretchen Whitmer, focused and continues to focus on fixing the damn roads. A report recently said the state needs an additional $3.9 billion a year to fully fund road repairs. How would you fix Michigan's crumbling infrastructure?
Well, I just recently saw the governor state that they topped the 24,000 mile marker and 1,600 bridges, and there's more work to be done. We're on the right path. So we're going to finish fixing the roads, the dams, and the bridges. But you can't do it by taking out bonds and increasing our debt in order for us to pay for it in the future. There's other financial streams, whether it's using casino revenue from Detroit or figuring out how we can adjust some funding in order for us to reasonably lay out. We have a small window to do road work from this window to that window. What is feasible that we can get done? The answer to your question is a long-term fix. We are not going to fix the roads and bridges and dams in the next 2 years. This is a long-term maintenance because of our weather, and you got to have a long-term plan.
Well, talking about a long-term fix, you have House Republicans who have proposed a plan. Governor Gretchen Whitmer has proposed her plan. They're actually not that far apart when they come to the dollar amount. Both of them would be about $3 billion. House Republicans, though, say there's money already in the budget. Governor Gretchen Whitmer says that there's going to need to be increases somewhere. Sounded like you were saying that there's money in the budget for road repairs, or would you see the need to increase funding?
Both. When you have an $81 billion state budget and you have line items in there, they took in, $86 billion and they spent 84. Where's that extra funding coming in? And I'm sure her conversations with Speaker Hall and Senator Brinks, they're diving deep into those line items of where they can maybe redirect some funds. But to your second point, I have watched and seen how the governor has worked with Republican House leadership, including those in Washington, to try to fix issues that Michigan needs fixing and to help the people. So I applaud the fact that you have some bipartisan ideas coming. How close they are, those are conversations that nobody running for governor is involved with right now. But we're going to figure out a way how we can use that funding, additional funding, without raising taxes and going further in debt.
You also talked about small businesses when you were talking about fixes for the economy. Much of the oxygen for the first 2 months in Lansing was really taken up with the debate over the state's minimum wage and sick time leave laws. If governor, at the time that those bills reached your desk, would you have signed the compromise into law?
A minimum wage doesn't mean it's a livable wage. It's growing the way it's supposed to be. But if you look at how you live your life and I live mine, we want it, and that's what UAW is fighting when it comes to dignified wages. A wage where you're actually having money left over at the end of the day to go do something and to have a legacy. So yes, I will continue to support people having more money at the end of the day after bills are paid.
Sure. So just to get your thoughts, though, the bill that the governor signed actually slowed the rate of the minimum wage increase. Are you saying you wouldn't have signed that bill?
Well, without looking at the bill language from this conversation, I wouldn't know how to respond without seeing what exactly the proposals are on each side. What I will say is I'm always a proponent of building up people's wages in order for them to have a healthy and a vibrant life.
We're speaking with the sheriff of Genesee County, Chris Swanson, a Democrat who has announced he is running for governor. So, Sheriff, after you announced that you were running, Planned Parenthood of Michigan put out a statement that they were, quote, deeply concerned about your past reported support for anti-abortion policy. This was after the Detroit News reported on a conversation that you had with the director of Flint Right to Life. In that conversation, you reportedly said that you were, quote, pro-life. Where do you stand on abortion rights?
Well, I think it's an issue that everybody needs to be concerned about, and we need to protect women's reproductive rights and comprehensive care. And I took that and I went to them personally, and I met with those organizations, the ACLU, in person, and I made sure that they knew that should something usurp that, it's going to have to get through me. And that meeting that we had several months ago was a fabulous meeting, and I was able to get them to see where I am personally, and that's where I stand. I will make sure that women's rights are protected.
In 2022, Michigan voters approved a constitutional amendment adding reproductive freedom and reproductive rights into the state constitution. So you're saying you voted in favor of that proposal?
Right. We will continue to support that.
Finally, Sheriff, let's talk politics. Let's talk about the Democratic Party. There are a lot of conversations right now about the future of the party. Recent polling shows some of the lowest favorability ratings in history. And Democrats are trying to figure out where they go from here. Is it a more progressive fight, or is it a more pragmatic and moderate wing? What's your take?
Well, I saw it firsthand last year by doing a commercial with the president right before the debate. I worked with the White House during that production. And then when he decided to step down and Kamala Harris became the nominee, working direct with the Democratic National Convention and planning out that time that I was able to speak and on day 4. So I saw firsthand the messaging, and then I saw the results like you did in November of 2024. And so the answer is not to repeat what we learned the hard way, but there's still a lot of good. We're not a broken party, but there's a lot of talent and there's a lot of messaging and there's a transition going on. And so that's why I think it's important that if you disagree with me, that doesn't mean that you're wrong and that you're my enemy. If I've heard one thing across the campaign trail and even before, people are exhausted, myself included, with the division. I'm running on merit. And I think Democrats have to run on merit. That's what I think the messaging has to be. The power of social media. I reach millions of people on social media by just being transparent and unedited. Those are the ways that people respond now more than ever before. And we need to evolve and continue to reach those individuals. It's not the same playbook anymore.
That is Genesee County Sheriff Chris Swanson, who has announced that he is running for the Democratic primary for governor in 2026. Sheriff, thanks so much for the time.
Thank you, Zoe. And I appreciate all that NPR does.
And you can find the conversations with the other candidates running for governor at the website, michiganpublic.org. And while you are there, check out the details for our next Speakers Series event. We will be joined next week by NPR's politics team, Asma Khalid and Domenico Montanaro. That is as we discuss what it has been like to cover the first 100 days of the second Trump administration. More details about the virtual event are at michiganpublic.org/events. And that is It's Just Politics for today. I am Zoe Clark.
And I'm Rick Pluta.
Let's talk again next week.